Hey guys, this is Bill Mort from Quorum. Thanks for joining. Looks like many people have already signed in, so we'll go ahead and kick this off. Today's topic is around cyber liability insurance. So several of our clients have actually reached out to us with different questions. Some of those we sent out in a blurb where if I have a good cyber liability insurance policy, do I still need to put as much emphasis on my security defense? Or if we look at this on the reverse side, if I have a really good backup and DR strategy in place, then is cyber liability insurance still important to me? There's more questions on what is covered and what's not covered in the event of a disaster. And then what do I need to do to make sure that my cyber liability insurance policy will actually pay out in the event that I need it to? So there's been some new requirements, and not only do you need to do those requirements to make sure you get the payment, but also recording that you're taking those actions in case you get audited. So these are just some of the questions we're going to go through today. Since it seems like there's a lot of people who are confused about this area or have questions, what is covered, what's not covered, other details about their plan, what they need to do to make sure that they are covered. As we're going through this, and maybe right now, if you want to go ahead and send me any questions not listed here, if there's any topics that you're interested in hearing about related to cyber liability insurance or its requirements, go ahead and ping them over now, and we'll do our best to answer them during this presentation. Also can say that it's been one of our more popular webinars that we've ever hosted, so I can see that there's a lot of questions kind of surrounding this. As we go through the kind of Q&A here, I'm going to have a conversation with my partner in crime over here, Gabriel. So maybe I'll pose some questions that I've heard from my clients that I've talked to or working on different deals or opportunities, or advising people who've reached out to us, and then Gabriel can kind of give his 2 cents on what he's experienced and what he's seen. Thanks for the questions. Keep firing them over.
Great.
Gabe, if you want to go ahead and take this slide, maybe just kind of, I'm sure everyone's aware of cyber liability insurance, maybe just give us a little background on how it's morphed and what it looks like today.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, cyber liability insurance really started as an add-on thing, probably around 15 years ago to regular business insurance plans. It was really to help things like a breach in your environment, or if you got a virus and you lost data, or had a natural disaster. So it was more mundane than it's really grown into because of things like ransomware and the hyper focus that the world now has on your digital security. So as it evolves, it's now kind of split off. So what you might have had as part of your normal business insurance might not be an all-encompassing cyber insurance policy that you might get separately. And so we're going to talk about the differences kind of between them. But cyber risk insurance, cyber liability insurance, they all kind of talk about the same thing. It really just depends on which insurance company you're talking with. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide, or any questions that have come in.
No questions on this particular slide, so why don't we go ahead and look at some of the why is cyber liability insurance so important, or why does it continue to become more and more important?
Yeah, so cyber liability insurance has really grown in the standards area. It's done two things. So number one, the amount of people that want cyber liability insurance has gone up over the last 2 years by 60%. So 60% of people that are filing for a business insurance policy are also now adding in cyber insurance. So that's a big growth and a big change. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that 6 out of every 10 small businesses within half a year of getting a major breach or a major cyber attack basically close up. Wow. And so the need for it is now becoming mainstream. whereas only the bigger companies, the Wells Fargos or the IBMs of the world used to have this kind of stuff. Now it really is an every company thing. The other part is the breach response costs have really gone up over the last year. And the reason for that, and let me define what breach response is. So if I got ransomware, I have to pay for that ransomware. But the breach response means if any of my data was compromised because of that ransomware or malware attack, I might have third-party customers suing me because of the breach in their data. And those costs have skyrocketed. We as a culture have been very litigation friendly, we'll say. And that has really blossomed because people are really knowing that, hey, my digital information out in the world is still mine and it needs to be secured. And if you're not going to secure it, I'm going to come after you. And most of those suits have really come from customers suing larger companies, but we're going to see that kind of even more evolve over the next couple of years. And then the cost of ransomware actually stayed pretty steady over the last couple of quarters. And it's about $142,000, $150,000 is the average cost of ransomware. Now, that's taking in consideration the things like the pipeline stuff or the SolarWinds stuff. Those are big, but those are 1 in a million. It's all the little customers that are getting hit with a $142,000 bill that they don't have the money for. A five employee business, let's say a doctor's office that gets hit, that's a lot of money to come up with to make sure that that data stays secure. That kind of feed
Yeah,
into some of the latest things we're seeing.
totally. And are you seeing that in these breaches that it's almost become expected or a standard that if clients' information is affected, that the company that had the malware or ransomware will have to make a payment?
Ooh, that's hard. If they have a good backup strategy, the ability to recover from those ransomware attacks has gone up considerably over the last 2 years because people have actually implemented much more resilient backup strategies. So that's the first thing you want to do. You want to have a backup strategy that not only doesn't rely on your infrastructure, which seems weird, but it follows all of the rules of a backup policy. So the 3-2-1 rules, the offsite rules, the security rules, the multi-factor authentication rules, all of those pieces have to factor into your backup strategy where they weren't before. I've been in the backup world a long time, and the number of customers that left the default password in their backup software was enormous 5 years ago. And that's drastically changed over the last few years because people realize that the malware can then put in the default password and get to my backups, right? It's these common things. Of course, we say it out loud and everyone goes, of course, that makes sense. But I still have a large number of people that, we see them come into us and they have default passwords at their backups. So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how the cyber liability insurance maybe sets their cost, or how they actually set up their payments, or how they value incidents. How does that work exactly?
This is actually a great slide to kind of go through that. If we were talking about car insurance, it's pretty easy. They know the value of your car. They know the likelihood you're going to have for an accident. They have history of years and years and years of car accidents and how people driving and drivers' habits and areas and regions and traffic and government mandated insurance means that everyone has it. So they have a tremendous amount of data to understand what the probabilities are that you're going to get into an accident so that they can build their policy around that. With cybersecurity insurance, it's a different ballpark. They don't know how much your data is worth. It's very hard to guesstimate that. And people that have cyber incidents tend to shut down and not tell anybody about it because they don't want the public relations problems. So the amount of data that these insurance companies have for non-policy holders or just in general population is very small and very limited. So they're trying to build models that anticipate what these things are going to be, but they just don't have any idea. And the fact that cybersecurity insurance is really about a 10-year-old concept um, leads into that further, where they're like, we only have 10 years of data, limited amount of customers that give us that data. It's really hard to understand what to set our policies to, what our liabilities are. And so what we're seeing drastically across the different insurance companies is different insurance companies are varying their policies and putting in a lot of stipulations that didn't exist years ago. I saw a policy that covered ransomware but didn't cover malware, to give you an example. So the change in the cybersecurity environment is quickly evolving, and it's changing in such a way that the insurance companies, as they're getting data, are starting to morph policies and change them and lock them down and create scenarios that they don't cover specifically, because they know that those are like health insurance. They're going to be those ones that just there's no way to stay financially viable and cover that kind of thing.
Yeah. So it sounds like with it being such a new industry, and still even the insurance providers themselves not having experience in every scenario that could happen, they're putting in a lot of protections to protect their business as well. So what is covered and what isn't covered?
So there's a general consensus. Losses resulting in business interruption. This list here, if you look at it, these are the things that are normally covered. I'm going to kind of focus on the bottom one because it's interesting that I found a lot of policies that cover post breach for training and preventative measures, but they won't cover those same things pre breach. So you want to look for one that covers it both ways if you can. Having your insurance company provide you training to mitigate the chances that you're going to have a ransomware attack or a disaster is common sense, and the insurance companies that aren't doing that are basically using that as a bail themselves out. Well, we can give you training. Well, but great, it's too late now. Everyone knows, like, your training is going to be of limited value now because we've already had the incident. So that was one thing that kind of popped out at me. Quite a few actually insurance companies that gave that kind of stuff.
So most people think about maybe a ransom in a ransomware situation being covered, or maybe infrastructure loss, but it can cover quite a few other things, can't it?
Oh, it covers cyber insurance or cyber liability insurance covers a wide range of things. We tend to say cybersecurity insurance because everyone thinks of ransomware nowadays. But yeah, liability insurance covers all kinds of things. Let's say you had a flood or a natural disaster, that actually is part of your cyber insurance. And that's actually kind of where it got its roots early on. Is, people would have a natural disaster happen that's supposed to cover the business, and part of that had to be that data. So cyber insurance was kind of born out of the natural disaster focus, but as it's evolved and added the security pieces, that's where all of these other things have really come in.
And so it can cover even things maybe that people might not think are IT related, right? Like operational systems or operational infrastructure that maybe is tied to the IT system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It also covers, the loss of the physical hardware, or like we had a customer that had something happen at their data center, and they ended up suing the data center for it to get their money back, but they lost like 5 of their servers because the data center had some kind of power glitch or something and fried their servers. And that was part of their cyber insurance policy to get the initial coverage, but then the cyber insurance company went after the data center to get paid back.
Interesting. Well, what are some things that are potentially not covered in cyber insurance policies? Seems like that list keeps growing and growing.
Every day. The things that aren't covered are purposefully vague, and and really designed to give the insurance companies a way to get out of a bad cyber incident. So I kind of bolded a couple of these, like the security issues that are in the realm of preventable. Well, how do you know what's preventable? How do you know how to handle those type of things? Or how do you know, like the bottom one, failure to fix a known issue? So if you're not applying all of your Windows updates or your Linux updates or whatever, and you get hacked and have a cyber incident, they have a get out of jail free clause, because that was a preventable incident. It's a known issue. It was posted as a patch. You haven't applied it. That's your fault. Uh, it's really kind of this mucky water, where now what we're seeing is a whole industry that's really building to not audit you against your policies or against compliance like PCI or HIPAA, but to audit you against your insurance policy,
Mm.
which is a different kind of take on it, because you're now not auditing to, these verified standards like NIST or whatever, but you're auditing to what some insurance company has set for your policy and put their get out of jail free cards in. So you have to make sure that you are taking and doing those audits. I would recommend, if you're a smaller company, to have a third party customer or a third party company come in to provide that kind of critique of your environment.
Yeah, really important to understand the policy and the details and what's covered, what's not covered, and what you need to do to make sure there's a payout, and also what you need to do to record to make sure you can prove that those actions were taken.
Absolutely. I want to just point out the top one too, because this affects some of our international customers. So financial damage caused by war or terrorism. The reason this one stands out is because of not the war part, everyone understands that, but because of the terrorism part. So a hypothetical scenario that has been talked about in these insurance circles is, if a cyber attack is so big that the government feels it has to get involved. And if you think of like the pipeline or like the SolarWinds incident that happened, if the government had enacted and said, hey, this is an act of terrorism, that would have given all those insurance companies a get out of jail free card. And it's a very scary thought that if it were so big that it could take the insurance companies down, they have this clause in there that says, well, if the government says it's terrorism, then we can't cover it.
Mm.
So it's a very sketchy thing, which all of these get out of jail cards really point you to one thing that you have to really keep in mind, is having the insurance policy does not mitigate or change your need to have a good security and recovery policy, right? In fact, it should emphasize that need. This page that you guys are all looking at should emphasize your need to have a great best practices security and recovery strategy in your environment, because anything that you don't have in that can lead to this kind of thing where the insurance company won't help you.
It's great to know. So that's a common question. So these aren't ors, these are actually layers of a fully functioning system: security, backup and recovery, and cyber liability insurance, all working together.
And each of them kind of depends on the other, right? You can't have a good security policy without a good recovery policy. And if you don't have those two things, your insurance policy is not going to cover you. So it really does layer on top of each other.
Yeah, I think this slide speaks to kind of what you were mentioning there.
Yeah, Forrester's article, if anyone wants to read Forrester's article on cyber insurance, it is awesome. They really dug in, and if you look at the bottom part where they say, hey, it makes it difficult for CISOs to really trust the cyber insurance to pay out. And it's because they have so many requirements now in those things. The red line capability of those insurance policies is crazy. So have a third party. If you're not comfortable reading and understanding all the terms that are in your insurance policy, have a third party review it. Have all of those things defined. Make sure that you are 100% confident that you're going to meet the criteria so that when you have a cyber incident, you're going to be covered. I can't stress that enough. I saw people coming in where they had nobody read these policies and they just thought it was, the blank check to get them out of jail, and had an incident and they weren't covered. So it is a big issue that's in the industry right now.
Speaking to the line of the 25% average increase on premiums, so I actually had a question from Phoenix who's attending today, and was, what can we do to get our premiums lowered?
Phoenix, that's a great question. Some of the things that I've actually already talked about are going to lead to that. Having a third-party audit come in and tell you your vulnerabilities, and having your ideal backup strategies and security strategies in place and verifiable, those help, because the new cyber insurance, like if you got a dedicated cyber insurance policy, that questionnaire that you're now asked, where it went from like a single page of 10 questions, has become in some places a 30-page document where you're basically defining every policy you have, and it's basically an audit. And in order to sign up for the cyber insurance, they're auditing your environment and your answers to those questions. And so your ability to provide those answers is going to be key to lowering your policy premiums.
Excellent, thank you. Moving right along, any other recommendations as far as maybe not lowering your premiums, but any other actions you want to kind of recap? I know you've touched on some of this as we were going through the slides.
I have, yeah. So obviously, doing all the other stuff is going to help your cyber insurance. Hiring a consultant is so critical. Having someone come in that's done this before and has looked at these policies and looked at your environments, having those consultants come in and review is going to be critical to that. Review annually. And the reason I say that is, I had a customer probably 2 years ago who had a cybersecurity policy in place, and when they did their renewal, they didn't reread the new policy. And one of the things that was placed in their policy was something for malware, for unpatched machines or something. And some guy's laptop infected this guy's network because it was unpatched, and insurance wouldn't cover it. Whereas a year before it would have. And so reviewing your policy annually, and even having a third-party audit annually, is super critical to that. Look more at the pre-event perks than the post-event perks. The post-event perks are awesome. You got to have them, right? Helping you with PR and communication to customers and all that stuff. Hey, those are great post-event perks. But training and audits and security vulnerability testing, any of those pre-event perks that you can get into your policy, pays dividends. Number one, you have to do it anyway. In today's day and age, you need to do those things. And number two, if they're going to help offset that cost, why not get that perk in your policy? They know it helps them in the long run not have to do a payout, and then they're acting in your best interest. Obviously, solid security policies and procedures that you adhere to, and that's probably the biggest part of that. You have to actually follow the policies. I've seen customers that have the most detailed policies and they're great, and then you talk to the IT guy and they goes, "Oh yeah, we don't do any of that." You're just hurting yourself. Keeping systems updated, I can't stress that anymore. I mean, everyone knows that nowadays. That should be common sense. But most importantly, is have a solid recovery plan. So we used to have a slide presentation on ransomware that talked about layers of protection, and your outer layer was, like your firewall and getting into your network, and then your antivirus, but your last layer of protection is your recovery. And what we've kind of come to understand is eventually everyone's going to get hit with ransomware. It's not going away, although we did have, last year was a good year for ransomware protection. the two largest ransomware creators were actually taken down last year by the government, which was a great step forward. But right now, we still see it everywhere. It's not gone away. It's just slowed down a little bit. It will ramp back up. And with that affecting everybody, the number one way to get out of ransomware is to have a good recovery policy. So when you get hit, because eventually you will, having a good way to recover from that is key.
Yeah, so backup and recovering kind of ends up being the fail safe for security. And then the
Absolutely.
cyber liability insurance is going to cover incidentals related to the incident.
Yeah, so cyber liability insurance is going to cover, it really covers a broad range, and you want to know what your coverage is, what they call first party coverage and third party coverage. First party coverage is covering you. Hey, I had to pay ransomware. Third party coverage is covering your customers, right? So if your customers want to litigate against you, or if something was breached that caused one of your vendors to say, hey, you're no longer in compliance with our policies, we're going to litigate against you. Having those kind of pieces in your cyber insurance policy are also important. So you really need kind of all three things. You need a good security policy, you need a good recovery plan, and you need a good cyber insurance uh, policy, I guess, to really cover your whole estate when disaster happens, or when you know, that evil event of ransomware or malware, or a breach, just a simple breach, if you were hacked. Those kind of things are important for cyber insurance.
Thanks, Gabe. Now, as we get close to the end here, just want to extend the invitation again. If anybody has any more questions, to go ahead and shoot them through via chat. One question we have from Ron here is around multi-factor authentication. Can you maybe talk about that as being a new requirement?
Yeah. So remember how I was talking earlier about cyber insurance policies are upgrading, and that ability to have your best practices in place. Well, now multi-factor authentication is part of a lot of the national audit strategies. So PCI, HIPAA, NIST is adding multi-factor authentication in. So if you're not applying multi-factor authentication to all your password policies, then you are not going to get covered by a lot of your insurance plans. And in our world, that backup and recovery, having multi-factor authentication is literally one of the most important ones you want it for, because it is your last stop. So that means they've gotten in your network, someone's clicked on the link they shouldn't have clicked on, the ransomware was installed, you've lost data. Having that backup be secure from getting malware passed to it is critical. So Quorum does that. Quorum now has multi-factor authentication. We also have a lot of security features like zero trust environments. We don't rely on your DNS or anything in your network other than the wire we're sending data on to secure our product. So all of those things kind of add up to give us the solution that helps you really recover from this. And to date, we have not lost a single customer to ransomware.
That's great. When you say a solid recovery plan, what's that mean? Is there some key components to make sure that your backup is actually be able to rely on in a ransomware or malicious software situation?
Yeah, so we had a thought exercise with this not too long ago with a lot of potential customers, and we asked them what they're using now and what they're doing, and a lot of customers have backup. In fact, backup is pretty standard kind of universally now. The problem that they had is when they had a problem, their ability to recover and get up and running again actually meant a loss of physical dollars to them because work could not be performed. So I give you the example of like a manufacturing plant, right? If the systems are down, even though you have a backup, if you can't immediately turn that server back on and get it working, you're not producing. And so that's literal revenue that's lost. So it's not just about having a backup strategy, but a recovery strategy that meets your business needs. That's really critical. And in the world of cyber insurance, that policy needs to extend to the security of those backups and that recovery plan. So you want to have separate hardware. You want to have separate hypervisors. If you can have a different hypervisor from your production, great. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if I got onto your VMware hosts and did my ransomware attack, and your backup is running on something other than VMware, you're actually better protected than if it's all homogeneous. So having a different environment, replicating off-site, and having the ability to recover off-site. These are all critical to your cyber insurance plan. You have to follow that 3-2-1 rule.
Great. Well, thanks, Gabe. Just wanted to thank everyone else for attending today. As we're wrapping up here, if you think of any more questions, please feel free to shoot us an email. I'm also going to ask our reps internally to give everyone who attended today a follow-up call and just get your feedback, see if this was helpful. If you think of any questions that we didn't answer today, be happy to take those. We're also always interested to hear on future topics people would like to hear covered to make sure these are engaging and fruitful for the people who sign up. So that's something we can discuss as well. And if you have, of course, interest in learning more about Quorum's recovery plan, how that protects our clients from ransomware or what a recovery situation looks like, we can arrange a demonstration or a walkthrough of the technical piece of Quorum as well. So thanks everyone for your attendance today. We appreciate the questions that you sent through and look forward to following up with each of you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.